Wholeness means to me being in a state of joy.
Wholeness means feeling complete, owning my authentic gifts.
Wholeness is really connected. Everything is connected to everything.
Wholeness is where we have access to all parts of ourselves.
What comes to your mind when you think about the concept of manifesting?
Well, first of all, I think it's really hard. And then I think back to when I first kind of learned about it. And I remember it was like mid 2000s. I feel like people kept talking about The Secret.
Yeah,
I
yep.
know that rings a bell. And it was this weird, and it was like a secret. Like people were like, did you hear about The Secret? And you're like,
Yeah.
I don't know. And so somehow, I don't know if it was, I don't think it was on Netflix right away. I mean, I think it is now.
Right.
But I think it was like a DVD passed around. I don't remember.
A book?
And
There was a book?
oh yeah, there was a book.
Uh-huh.
And so I think I'd watched the movie or something like that. And it was like red swirlies. I'm like, whoa. And it kind of reminded me like Da Vinci Code. It's kind of like,
Yeah.
whoa. And I watched it and I was like, yeah, okay. I had this vision board of my house. And then 2 years later, I was standing in the house. I was like, okay.
Yeah.
And it seemed like really big, seemed so huge.
Mhm.
And then, but I was like, I'm buying into it. I'm going to like manifest close. I remember being at the gym. I'm like, I'm going to always have a close spot. And it didn't really work all the time.
Right.
And that to me was like, I'm done. I give up.
Mhm.
And then I remembered an experience I had as I was thinking about manifesting. And let's see, there were things in my life that weren't quite what I wanted. So like I
Right.
wasn't quite in the house that I wanted. Like it was our first house.
Mhm.
And I remember my mom saying, Chalene, just write down a list of things that you want
Mhm.
and like just make it big. I was like, okay. So I made this list, didn't think anything of it. And I'm trying to think of how many years it was later, maybe like 5 or 6. And we were moving out of that house and I found that list and everything on that list had happened except for one thing.
Wow.
So it was big things. It was like a new house. It was car that fits my whole family. My husband to have a better paying job. And I was mystified. Have I done it again? No. And I need to probably.
Yeah.
So like, but it works.
It works.
The funny thing was I didn't even think about that stuff. Like I wasn't driving into the gym parking lot being like, I'm going to get a close space. It was like, I put it out there.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't even really work towards it. Maybe I did in my subconscious, but I'm glad that memory came back to me because I'm like, that proves that it works. Anyway.
Yeah. I think you bring up 2 points. One, the things that kind of get in the way is that we think it's got to be big and fast. You know what I mean? Like we want it to be big and fast. And that can stop us from moving forward. I know it does for me because it's like, well, that didn't work. The end, like we want it big and fast. I had this mentor tell me this. I thought it was really good. She said, and she was quoting someone else. I should have looked up the quote, but it's like, you cannot harvest on the same day you plant the seeds. That there is, and I think that gets in the way because I think our manifesting is like, okay, I just got to do it this one time, or I just got to do it big and then it's going to happen. Where I think if you think about it more like a garden, more like planting the seeds, feeding the dream or the idea, and I think we have these experiences like you did, where it did just kind of happen in the background, and I think sometimes those are to help us maybe get the concept of it, to kind of, I think we have no expectations. It's kind of when it does work and then we're like, oh, well, now I'm going to do it every time, and then,
right.
And then when it doesn't happen, it's like, what's going on, and, and I really thought about that because I don't want to lead anybody astray. Because sometimes when we talk about manifesting, we just think big and large and just fast, like it's just if you don't get it, there's this idea, what's wrong with you? What'd you do? And those kind of things. And
yeah,
I really do believe that we play a big part in it. I definitely do. But I also think if it's not happening, then that's where we can stop and look at something, some of the things getting in the way, so.
Okay.
So for instance, I think of manifesting as like, I thought about it. I thought it's like a revolution, like it's a revolution in how we show up. That's what manifesting is. It's almost changing how we show up, what we allow ourselves to be true for ourselves. It's a whole revolution. It's just not writing it down on a piece of paper. It's more than
Mm-hmm.
that. It's more than that. In fact, for funny, I Googled, or I asked ChatGPT actually, like,
Okay.
how do I manifest a new car? So I'm like, let's see what
Okay.
AI says about manifesting a new car. And it gave me some great concepts that I think we can jump off of. So here's a step-by-step guide according to
Wow.
AI. So the first one is to set a clear intention, be specific about the make, model, color, and any of the features you desire in the new car. Visualize yourself driving it and feeling happy and grateful. So that's step one. And I think that the lesson to learn about that is the reason why. So people are like, okay, I got to make sure that I know the color. And we get so caught up in the details, the how-to details. But the whole reason why we want to get the details where we want to be so specific is because once we have that specific thought in our mind, or the idea in our mind, we begin to be able to feel what it feels like to have that car. It brings in the
Hmm.
senses of it triggers within our brain what it's like, what it would look like, what it would feel like. And those are physical things. Those are actions that we will take one day with that car. And so the more detail we have, the more we can put ourselves in that scene, where it's not so much about just making sure you write it down. It's about creating the scene so strongly that it feels like it can be true.
Wow. So I was researching some manifesting teachers, and there was a lady, I'll share it a little later, but she told this story about this woman who needed this $3,000.
Hmm.
And she's like, "Hey, I need you to go to lunch and you're going to order a meal like you had $3,000." She's like, "Don't get the cheapest thing on the menu." So she was kind of doing the same thing of like
Hmm.
really
As,
living in that feeling,
as
that
if, yeah.
experience. Mhm.
Yep. Yeah, totally. It's the as if. I mean, that's what manifesting is, living as if, and not just throwing money around. It was like it's in the body. You know what I mean? Like it's
Mhm.
literally like experiencing that, beforehand, and seeing what that's like. And I think, like with your list, that's the thing, you wrote it down, and people, this is another part, is they'll say, then let it go. I think um one of the goals for that ChatGPT said was to trust the process, trust that the universe will align, and stay open, and be open to unexpected ways of it happening, and things that are coming, be
Okay.
open. And I think that's kind of that idea too, is like you wrote it down, and then you kind of let it go, and then time goes by, and you think, oh, there it is, there's what I wanted. And I think that really happens more times than not, if we, you know so I'm gonna put a link in the show notes, for if you go to my website, michellewingle.com, you can get it's called a manifesting magic kit I created. And um because I really wanted to kind of investigate this idea of manifesting, because it's so much a part of this self-help kind of world. But I think if it's so easy, then why are people struggling? So I really kind of wanted to look at it from
Mhm.
another angle. And as I sat with it, I realized, there's two things going on when we're manifesting, or when we're in the flow and things are just happening. And I think there's two things that can help. One is that emotional flow, which I call that idea um, of being just, having those high vibration, emotions. And if we're in a state where, let's say we're in grief, let's say we're in fear, anxiety, we're having that experience, or let's say we're unmotivated, or we have shame, then we're not in this emotional flow. So let's not
Hmm.
do some manifesting. Let's stop and kind of figure out what's going on. That's the best first step, is to Say
Yeah.
like, I mean, if I'm grieving a loved one, let's just grieve for a minute. You know what I mean? Or if I've grieved,
Yeah.
for a year or 2 years and I can't get out of bed, let's look at that and see that's what needs to happen first. That's what's calling for us
Yeah.
to heal or to feel better or to, we're not going to manifest in that state. Then you have your mental flow, which is it's like your conscious mind is able to focus, like you're able to think about what you want, and your subconscious mind is not sabotaging that. So for instance, like if I'm having a time when I'm hungry, let's say, or I'm sick, or I'm in danger, like I'm not gonna be in mental flow. I'm not gonna be like thinking about
Right.
positive things. Those are so that's I'm gonna stop and say, okay, I need to look at those things. If I'm hungry, I need to go eat. If I'm tired, I need to go sleep. So that my brain has the ability my conscious mind has the ability to, focus and write down the things that I'm in need of. And then,
Hmm.
but it's important because the unconscious is really where things run and program. And so if I want something, but my programming tells me no, if I want to if I want a nice new car, but my programming, let's say in my childhood, it just wasn't, there was not a belief that we could have nice cars, or nice cars meant you were selfish, or nice cars meant
Hmm.
that you were totally rich, or that let's say even it was a good thing. Let's say that your family values where you pay cash for a car, and you're just never going to be able to make that much cash. Then
Hmm.
that subconscious programming isn't going to allow that desire to come to fruition. It sabotages itself in a way. There's a really good book called The Big Leap by Gay Hendricks, and
Okay.
I read it last year, and it's been life-changing. I've wanted my kids to read it. I've got my husband to read it. And it's really, really good because it's this whole idea of these um, of unconscious thoughts. He calls it he says, first of all, we've got to talk about how we thrive, or how I say thrive. What is our, what are we genius at? We got to look at that.
Okay.
So a lot of the book is about that, but it's also about these ideas of, kind of imposter syndrome, or he calls it an upper limit problem. So like once we reach
Okay.
that upper limit of like the highest we think we can go, that subconscious literally will come in and sabotage, whether it makes us sick, whether it makes us, you know, get in an argument. Let's say we're going to get
Hmm.
you're going to get a raise, or you're going to get a promotion at work, but your upper limit says, no way, that subconscious mind says, no, we're not good enough to have that VP position. So we get in a fight
Okay.
with our boss, or we randomly stop showing up. It's like so subconscious. We don't really even know that it's happening. And that's what gets in the way, I think, a lot of our manifesting is these programs that run in the system below the surface, um, telling us what we can and cannot have.
I've noticed that I have about a similar lifestyle as my parents and my husband's parents.
Hmm.
And I've noticed other patterns where people are in like maybe a poverty cycle, and
Yeah.
like they're naturally, that's just where they go.
Hmm.
And it's not an intelligence issue or anything like that. And you have people who are maybe more wealthy and their kids end up being the same. And I keep thinking, is it because
Hmm.
they're given to it? And I was like, I think their subconscious just makes that
Yeah.
pattern keep going.
Yeah,
Is
it
that kind of the
it
same thing?
allows for it. I think so too. I think it does. It's what our reality. So
Hmm.
if you think about, like, if my reality is this, if my reality is I live in this nice house, I have this nice car, if that just feels good to me, then that's going to happen. In fact, ChatGPT, the second thing
That
it said
ChatGPT
to do was to visualize, and it said, spend time each day visualizing yourself in your new car. Imagine the sensations of driving it, the smell of the interior, and the satisfaction of owning it. And I think that gives
okay.
two hints. One is that we're looking for practicing the physical experience, that physical experience that we have on our body, that belief that it can happen, the idea that
Okay.
we're going to see it is what attracts things to us. That's it. It's a physical thing. That's
Wow.
something to
Okay.
really pay attention to. The second thing is that as we're doing that, we can pay attention to the discomfort, the part of us that just says this isn't going to work. Like there's no way, or like no
That's
way.
like my hugest part. Yeah.
Yeah. And so if that happens, that's just the clue to say, okay, here's what's going on. What are my upper limit issues? Is what would happen if I took a brand new car home to my family? What would be their reaction?
Mhm.
And that's a clue. Or maybe like what also, if I have a brand new car, what are also the other beliefs that I just pack onto that? You know what I mean?
Okay.
Or those kind of things. Um, One of the things we can do is ask ourselves, on a scale of 1 to 10, how bad do I want this thing? Whether it's a car or a house or a love, whatever it is, how much do I want it? And most people are going to say 10, like I want it
Yeah.
1 out of 10. And then, but the next question is key because it said, how much do I believe I can get it? If that's any
Oh,
less, right? If that's any less than 10,
yeah.
we've got an upper limit problem. We've got,
Wow.
that's how we know that's the space of the belief that we know we've got to work on some things.
Hmm.
And so you know, uh, that becomes a starting ground for what's getting in our way, what's.
Okay. So
So
then we explore. So yeah, are you going to talk about how to get over that?
yes, I think
Because
so.
that's what I need.
Yeah, right. We all do. And we need it in different times and different ways. And I think that's another thing too, is like, if it's a day where I'm not feeling it, like I just feel like there's days where my self-esteem or my confidence in myself are just not the best.
Mhm.
Speaking to another book, I did a whole series of podcast episodes on the fifth agreement. And most people are familiar with the fourth agreement, but I really recommend moving on and adding the fifth agreement. You can read the fifth agreement all by itself. And then, like I say, I have episodes almost for each chapter where I talk about it. But one of the concept of that book is just, there's these 4 or 5 rules to live by. And one, it just always resonates with me. It's always do your best and recognizing that your best is different on different days. So if I,
Okay.
here I have this range for myself that I know on a great day, it's going to look like this. And then on a not great day, it's going to look like this. And I'm not going to have the same standard for myself on both days. I'm just
Okay.
not. And
Yeah.
so if I'm having one of those days, then I kind of move into it. If I move into it, if I say today is just not my day, I'm just gonna hold my ground, versus move forward, maybe try and not tumble down or try to not spiral, but just hold my ground. I'm not going to try and push myself forward. I'm just going to figure out what I got to do to take care of myself for that day. Then we
Okay.
pop back up a little faster. That's one of the things, is just allowing ourselves this human part of ourselves. Because I think that's what manifesting, it feels almost extraterrestrial. Like it feels almost out of this world, right?
Magic.
Yeah,
Magic.
it's magic. Exactly. And and I even play on that because it's like, yeah, it feels magical, but we are here in this physical experience with physical limitations and time and physics. I mean, we are
Hmm.
living in this time and space, and so we have to allow that into it as well. And it feels magical. I mean, when you picked up that paper and looked at it, I bet you were like, that's pretty magical. But again, it's
Yeah.
what we're looking for, what that experience was. It wasn't even about the house. It wasn't even about the new job. It was about that powerful feeling you felt when you looked at that paper and went, oh my gosh, all of this
Yeah.
has happened, you
Right.
know? And to chase, that's what we're chasing, that
Okay.
feeling. So when we're having another feeling, then we can ask ourselves and get clues from those feelings. And like I say, that's where the 4 bodies comes in. Okay, what emotions am I feeling? ask ourselves that. What thoughts are going through my head? And sometimes it's really hard to slow down those thoughts because they come in at like a microsecond and it's a whole concept. It's like this never happens,
Yes.
whatever, but like it comes in a whole concept. But if we can slow down enough and really understand what thoughts are going through our heads, what beliefs are happening. So the spiritual body is about connection and meaning, or the unphysical things that are going on that are not physical. So the way that we can use that spiritual body is to look at those thoughts, to look at those feelings, those emotions, and see what they're connected to, see what meaning we have behind them. So like if I think, if I'm feeling really insecure, or inconfident, not confident, I'm going to say, what meaning do I give to that, to confidence? What do I think confidence is supposed to look like? And then is that true? You know what I mean? Is that, I start to realize that I think, who do I think is confident? And start to think about those people and what aspects of them do I associate with confidence, and do I really not have that? Is there really, am I really missing that? Or let's look at like, what about some other people? They might not be like, let's say I think all the people that I think of that are confident are these very loud, extroverted, presidents of companies or whatever. And then I start to say, wait, is that true? Do you have to be that to be confident? Or there's this person over here and wow, they actually have a lot of confidence. So where do I probably fit more into that than I really think. It's really takes a moment and some time to sit down and really analyze the beliefs that we have. Like they just happen so quick. They just happen so quick. We move on to the physical body. So what's key is that what we're doing is we're actually creating physical things, right? That's what we're usually manifesting. It's something physical usually. And so that's why we really need to pay attention to the physical parts of who we are. So physically, I'm going to think about the details of it, the smells, the sounds, the what images come to mind. And then the whole idea of manifesting is to align with and elevate the physical messages in our body so that we move into the flow because we understand what it's going to feel like. It's so real to us, it might as well be real, right? That's what manifesting is. Like it's so real to us that that's how it comes to be, and it's this balance between highly focusing on it and letting go, and letting go. And that's something that's like that. It's maybe, an individual journey there. Because where we can, again, we're going to use those sensations because it's like, okay, I need to look at that. I need to do that every day. I'm going to look at my manifest, like my board, my vision board. I'm going to look at that every day. So if I'm saying that in like this place that sounds like, or I can feel within myself that it's more like, I got to do it every day or else, versus an empowered, I'm totally doing this every day. This is so great. There's such a difference. And again, if I'm saying I got to do this every day, if there's like this clenching to it, or this like tightening to it, then it's not that I'm doing it wrong. It's just, hey, we're right here on the prefaces of discovering something about ourselves that needs some healing or some support.
Right.
And that's not a bad thing. That's not always a bad thing. Right?
Yeah, that does feel really different. I can see how in the past it's been and maybe you could say like coming from lack or coming from a place of desire might not be the right word, but
yeah.
What would be a better word? So either lack or
like a lack mindset or just a limit to it's that upper limit. It's the belief that we only can go this far, or we can only have this much, or we can only it's just we can't visualize it, we can't comprehend it because we haven't built that muscle. It's
Okay. So it could be lack, or it could be, I remember Lewis Carroll talking about, I think about impossible things every day. I set aside 15 minutes to think
Mm,
about impossible things.
yeah.
And so that feels very different. Like, I don't think
Hmm.
I could ever have this. So like, I'm going to think about impossible things for a few minutes. I don't
Yes.
know. I don't have a word for it. Do you have a word for it?
Yeah. Well,
It's just imagination. I don't know.
yeah, it's and it's I think it's also the opposite. So it's like, hey, if we can do that the opposite. It's like if I'm negative about this, say, okay, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a reminder on my phone at 2 p.m. I'm going to say all that stuff. I can't have this. I can't do it. This doesn't make sense for me for 1 minute and then I'm done. You know what I mean? So it's like
Okay.
it's almost the opposite too. It's like, okay, it's because if we just keep tightening it down, I think, that think about the impossible, it's like opening up is so much more powerful than tightening down. If it's like, I shouldn't think that, or I've got to do this, or it has to be this way. Um, those are just ideas that stop us, that
Does stop the flow immediately.
it
Like you
does.
just feel like done.
Good job. Yeah. But then the ideas of the impossible, like that's the thing is the best words I love is like, what if? You know what I mean? Like
Hmm.
just begin with, what if I got a new car, and what if I really felt comfortable driving that new car? And what if, and it just opens up the flow. It just allows that possibilities to exist, you
Hmm.
know, and it's like little training wheels on it, because as we practice that, as we do the what ifs, then we're practicing those sensations, and then pretty soon it's like, yeah, that's possible, you
Hmm.
know, that's
Yeah.
that's possible. Or even it's like, that's not impossible, like that's not impossible. I love, remember Dumb and Dumber, when he's like, so the chances of, what are my
So you're
chances?
saying there's a chance.
Yeah, so you're saying there's a chance, yes. And she's like, 1 in a million, and he's thrilled. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's thrilled. I mean, that's it. Like, why would you, all that he needed was he didn't even need her. He just needed the chance. He needed the possibility. And then he was thrilled. Like, he was like,
Yeah.
yes, this is great. And I can practice that feeling. I can practice that feeling. I can't make her be my girl, but I can
Right.
practice that feeling of like, yes, there's a chance. There's a chance.
I think I need to print that out. Maybe I need to cross stitch that or something. So you're saying there's a chance.
Yeah, that is great. We should make t-shirts.
I should.
We should make t-shirts. So you're telling me there's a chance.
Yeah.
That is the feeling that he embodies. That is manifesting. So you're
That's
telling me
true.
there's a
That movie,
chance.
yeah, he's definitely, yeah, I like that.
Back in the day, back in the day. Well, ChatGPT says a couple more things.
Okay.
It says use affirmations,
Okay.
affirmations. I am grateful for my new car. I deserve to drive safe in a reliable vehicle. I attract abundance and prosperity, those kinds of I am statements, those affirmations. They're simple and small. And there's another thing where if I say an affirmation, but like it doesn't feel true, I'm going to stick
Hmm.
that over here and look at it again, or think of what are the possibilities, what would happen if that was true, how would that feel like if that was true. And so we're going to detour a little bit, and we're actually going to work on manifesting the feeling, not just the thing, you know what I mean. And like, well, what would that feel like if I thought that was true? And we can the best things we can do is manifest those sensations in our bodies. Like, we could manifest right now, if we talk about excitement and thrill, like you could manifest that feeling in your body, the little tickles in your tummy, or whatever that feels like.
Hmm.
We can do that, and so we use that to our advantage in manifesting physically outside of us. That's what it is. So the other thing they
Yeah.
talked about is to take inspired action. So that's another thing, is like, this is the one that I think kind of shuts people down, because we think we want it to be kind of magical. So therefore we
Hmm.
shouldn't have to work toward it. We shouldn't want to, it doesn't feel
Yeah.
like it would be as great if we had to work toward it. That's not manifesting. That's like work.
Or conversely, if I don't work for it, I don't deserve it. I think there's that
Right. That too. You're
middle
right.
space. Hmm.
You're right. But if you think about your list, what kind of things did you do to make that happen? I mean, did it just appear one day? I mean, first of all, you were packing your boxes when you probably found it. You were physically
Yeah.
moving at the
Yeah.
time.
I was moving. I don't know what I did unless it was just the feeling that maybe I not deserve it, but that it could be possible. I think it's that
Mhm.
whole that P word, the possible, but it
Mhm.
wasn't.
Well, did you
I don't
go
know.
looking for the house? Did you go house hunting?
I mean, yes, once it was available,
Yeah,
once the opportunity was there,
right.
but it wasn't right away.
Right. Not right away. That's true. I mean, that's where it's like, but that's the thing is even there, like we can stop right there and see the belief we have about it that it's going to be fast, it's going to be soon,
Yes.
and it's going to like uproot us and flip us around and plant us somewhere else. Like it's going to be this gigantic,
The
um,
Dorothy and Oz, it's going to be the tornado
yes,
dropping us down. Yeah.
uh-huh, uh-huh. And that's the thing was even the people that really, really talk about manifesting and they have the millions and whatever, they worked. It did not take them,
Yeah.
it didn't happen overnight. It didn't just fall in their lap. You know what I mean? It was effort meeting, their wishes and dreams. And
Yeah.
I know
But
for me,
also, I was just gonna say the effort doesn't always, because to me, when I'm thinking about something that seems really far out there, I think I have to blood, sweat, and tears. And
right,
I don't think it's really like that.
right,
I think it's effort, but I don't think it's like to the point where you want to die.
right. I think
I
you're
guess in
right.
my mind, it thinks that. I think that.
Well, once it moves over into, because that's a kind of a desperate tightening down, that
Mm-hmm.
desperate, I mean, so that's, there, like you said before, the flow stops because now we're desperately trying to make it happen. And that's not, that's not flow, you know? So,
Oh.
so and that's why for me, when I think about, I always think in like, in the idea of, like on this end, we've got this, and on this end, we've got this, like, and we usually need to meet somewhere in between, right?
Mm-hmm.
Usually it's somewhere in between. And, and that's where even like that number, if I say, how bad do I want it? That gives me a starting point. That gives me where I'm at. Where do I want, how bad do I want this on a scale of 1 to 10? So if I say a 7, then I know that my effort's going to be, it's not going to be a 10 effort
Okay.
if my desire isn't a 10, right?
Right.
If my belief is a 7 and my desire is a 10, that gives me kind of a place to work with it. I'm going to work within that smaller spectrum. So if it's like 7 and 10, I'm going to be working in a smaller spectrum than if like
Oh.
my desire is a 10, but my belief is a 1, that's a bigger spectrum I've got to close down. But
Right.
but most of the time it's not that big of a spectrum. It's smaller. It's a smaller step than we think to get from where we're going to where we want to be, or where we're at to where we want to
Okay.
be. And another thing that ChatGPT talked about is this idea of gratitude. So one thing that's, gratitude is, I don't know, it's almost like a magnet, when we have gratitude. And again, we
Yeah.
have to recognize, we got to feel those sensations. If I'm not feeling gratitude physically in my body, then we pause and look at what's going on in our lives. That gratitude, it's got to be authentic. It's got to be real. And if it's not, I trust that there's a good reason why,
Hmm.
first of all, I trust that
Okay.
something's there, something's in the way, our belief in ourselves or the experiences that we've had haven't allowed for us to have this gratitude, or whatever. There's something in the
Mm-hmm.
way. There's some need. There's like something calling out for healing. But gratitude, if we just kind of look around, your space and say, okay, what am I grateful for? Within a few minutes, you can kind of move into this place inside yourself. Those sensations kind of slow down. Our thoughts just kind of, you know, go to a more positive place, and we just kind of feel like, okay, yeah, that everything's kind of okay,
Feels like it
and
takes away that desperation to me.
yes, yes, I think
And
you're
that,
right. December, I knew I was flying out to be with my son, and they were having their baby, and I knew I was going to be gone for weeks, and
Right.
I was going to be on the road, and it was Christmas time. So I thought, I'm going to just say to my online audience, see you later. I'm just going to pause for a minute and not worry about it. And then I got home, and then we moved them home, and it's a big thing. But I found myself um, unmotivated, I guess, to get back onto social media. And every day I would just be like, and it bothered me. I was like, I should do that. Like, what's going on? But I, at the same time, I allow two things to exist at once. It was like, I know if I push myself, it's not going to work. Like the long-term solution isn't going to work. So every day, I'm like, okay, just one more day down, that I'm just going to let it go, and it was super uncomfortable. But I know from experience that if I allow the flow to happen, I get there quicker, even though it took a
Oh.
couple more weeks of like, just didn't happen today, or I'm just not feeling it today, and I'm just not. And two things happen. One is I'm honoring myself. I'm trusting myself, which is huge in that subconscious mind, to trust myself that it's not working. This is just not going to happen. And then sure enough, one day, then all of a sudden, I think I'm going to work on some posts. I think I'm going to do that. Or why don't I get on and I'll just do a live real quick. That's fine. And then it was just a natural next step for me. It was a natural thing to do versus a forced thing to do. And that's
It feels
flow.
very different. Even you just talking about it feels
Yeah.
very different.
Very, very different. Yeah. But it's so easy to be hard on ourselves, right? It's so easy. But I mean, so my husband shared with me this quote. It's like so powerful. It's like mic drop moment. Okay. I'm
Okay.
hoping I can remember it right. But it's like, we treat ourselves externally what was done to us relationally.
Okay.
So the way that we treat ourselves internally isn't just made up inside of us. It came from how we were treated relationally, or in a relationship from someone outside. That's how we gained that.
Wow.
Is
I
that
can
not a
look
much?
at like, yeah, my brain's like going filing all these like things.
Yes. And
Wow.
that's where the healing comes in, because that's the thing. So in fact, I'll share this. My therapist we go to therapy. We go to therapy every week. I don't know when we'll stop, because it's just great. Like, it's like we
Yeah.
have this, it's almost like an emotional coach that we can, or, like a trainer that helps us every single week. I don't know. Me and my husband keep looking at each other. And I'm like, I don't ever want to stop going, and it's great. So she works with each of us on our individual things, and together it's just kind of sometimes it just is like one of those chats. But she gave us this story last time that I thought was so powerful, that hits with this. There was a client she had, and when he came to her, he said, I need your help. I'm completely effed up, is the word he used, right? Like,
Okay.
and she said for 2 years, like, that was what they were doing, was like, I'm effed up, like, I need help. Like, and then one day, all of a sudden he realizes, as he's talked through some things for 2 years, as he's worked on it for 2 years, he was like, wait, I was effed up. Like, there's a difference there. Do you know what I
Yeah.
mean? And then his healing could really begin, because guess what? At the core of our beings, all of us, I don't care who we are, there is an answer, there is a reason, there is room for compassion for how we think about ourselves or how we show up. And that part needs to be, I think people, they go into manifesting trying to overcome those inner thoughts they have about themselves. You know what I mean? They're trying to get this thing on the outside of them to prove that they're worthy and able and lovable on the inside. And manifesting has got to go in reverse. There's got to be that love, that trust, that belief in on the inside, and then we go go manifesting. We don't use things. Things don't define our worth. Nothing defines our worth
Wow.
on the outside. And that's where, so that's why I kind of wanted to go into the idea of manifesting, because I think it is that backwards. We're trying to manifest that new car so that I am worthy. You know what I mean? Like, it's really the
Wow.
motivation most of the time is to be enough. I get it.
Dang.
I do it, like
Yeah.
I've done it, right? Like,
Right.
it's like
Yeah.
if that would just happen, that would tell me that I'm enough. And like, and really, really, that's very
Mhm.
super, super simplified. It's much more
Right.
complicated on the inside. But those, those things that are difficult to look at, because that was, again, I'll say, those things that we do, the things that we practice or that we do to ourselves internally was at least once done relationally. And
Hmm.
we're wounded and we're healed in relationship. And that's that spiritual body, that's the connection that we have. In order to be to heal, we have to have connection. We can't do that alone. It doesn't matter how great it doesn't matter what kind of car we drive. There's no reference to a happy life if we aren't connected to other people. It's like we're just built that way as humans, but we
Right.
live on that spectrum of needing this in order to feel good about myself and being connected in the world and having those good things. It's kind of complicated.
It's complicated because it's always changing.
Mhm.
Always.
Yep.
What we need one day isn't what we need the other day, or even down to the hour or minute, maybe.
Right. I think you're right. And I think, what about, that's the trust. What if you trusted that? What if you trusted the change? Trusted that that change has come in and that that's meaningful. You're not making that up. What if the
Right.
change is just what needs to happen?
Yeah.
Something to think about. Something
Okay.
to think about. So in the Manifest Magic Kit that I have
Okay.
on my website, it talks about the mental flow. So the idea that, again, that our subconscious is able to allow what we want to come in, and then our conscious is we're putting stuff into our conscious time, and we're not spending our whole time and energy of the day focusing on the new car, but we are going to make it conscious. We're going to put a conscious effort into getting, looking at that and feeling it and hoping for it and that kind of thing. And our brain, in neuro linguistic training that I have, we each person gets information in certain ways. We preference information. So it's not unusual, but like some of us will have a visual preference, some of us will have an auditory preference. Some of us will have a feeling in our body, which they call it kinesthetic. Like, it's like we
Okay.
feel in our body. Other people, there's an auditory, I have a little bit of auditory. My husband teases me because it's like I think as I talk, I think out loud a lot.
Oh,
So I'm
yeah.
very auditory. Some people, these rare ones, there's people that olfactory, which are the smell, they're smell oriented.
Hmm.
They are really,
Or taste.
yeah, or taste. Those two are kind of rare, but there's people that it happens like it's just they get information that way, that speaks, it goes. So like usually we have one of these ways that it just can go straight to that subconscious mind. Like, it's like,
Okay.
so in this kit, it gives you a test to help you realize which one you are, which one you prefer, which one seems to be, which do you look for? And then it gives you a list of words to use or ideas to use. So let's say, and you can see this in people. So if people start to use, if they're a visual person, they're going to say, look, see, envision, like crystal clear. That's a little hazy there. That's
Mm.
from your perspective, that might be your perspective. They're going to use you're going to find it in their vocabulary, where, let's say, an auditory person is going to say, hey, listen to this, or that doesn't sound right to me, or
Okay.
that's a bunch of babble, like, and so that's more auditory. Or here's a like the feeling person's going to say, that feels good to me, or I don't know, that's totally solid. Like, that's a solid idea,
Hmm.
Or this that gives me a cozy feeling, their words are gonna
Okay.
kind of show that. And so then we use that for ourselves. So then if I'm gonna make so let's say I'm a visual person, my I am statements or my manifesting statements or affirmations are going to be visually focused. So I'm going to say, I see myself in the car. I visualize driving down the road. The
Okay.
image the image of this car supports me, or what, I'm going to use those words. Where if it was auditory, I'm going to say like, I I hear myself, I hear the radio, in my new car, or we're just going to focus on that part. And it's almost
Okay.
just like our subconscious says, we'll accept it and say, okay, because it's just the
Mm-hmm.
way that we talk. It's like it's a one um, little micro, um, little connection in there that it just kind of lets that in, things with those words. It just kind of says, okay, so we're going to use that.
Yeah.
And as we think about um, that mental flow, there's also the thinking traps that get in the way. And in this kit, it goes through, I think there's like 10 thinking traps. And we've heard these before: black and white thinking, catastrophizing, labeling, mind reading. These are really cognitive behavioral therapy ideas that just,
Mm.
they're thinking things that stop us, but they're very brain oriented. And a lot of people start there. They're like, okay, let's just get rid of our black and white thinking, or let's get rid of our labeling, and that's helpful. But I think that's why I think it's so interesting to go on and do the emotional side of it, because we aren't all just thinking minds. We have an emotional flow too. And we all
Okay.
know that feels like, what it feels like when things are just clicking, like life is just happening, you're like,
Yeah.
today is good. And so, especially on those days, really pay attention to what that feels like. What's happening there? Some people use an essential oil and they smell it and it just shifts them. Some people pick up a card and read it. Some people go for a jog. Find
Mm-hmm.
those things that make that spark happen, and then do more of those things. Do more of those
Right.
things. You can think of emotional flow is like, what emotion am I feeling right now? And if I set it to music, what would the music be? What would that music be? And, if it's an upbeat music, hey, I'm kind of in a good place. If it's like scary, or if it's sad, then we can kind of, it helps us really get in touch with these emotions that we're having. And then in the kit, I talk about how we have emotions. I'm going to show it just quickly here. This little paper has an emotion, of these kind of negative emotions, we call them, or I like to call them more depleting, or just uncomfortable emotions, things that
Mm-hmm.
we would rather not have. And then they're connected to these positive emotions, and we come up with ways that, so let's say if I'm on here, let's say that I am in grief, like I'm grieving something, I've lost something, maybe I didn't get that
Mm-hmm.
job or whatever. The opposite emotion is love, because that's loss is really about, love. So what makes me feel love, and I really think about that for myself. It's like, I feel love when sometimes I feel loved or love when my room is organized. I mean, it could be so simple as that. Everybody's different.
Okay.
And so then I'm going to be like, okay, I'm going to organize my room, or
Mm-hmm.
when I get a treat, then, if when my husband brings me home a treat, I just feel so loved. And
Okay.
then I'm going to say, hey, honey, can you bring me home a treat? Like sometimes that's the other thing too, is we think it doesn't count if we have to ask for it, but that's really
Yeah.
empowering, actually. We're really
Okay.
owning ourselves. And so we do more of those things that to feel love, to help counteract maybe some grief that I'm going through. That's the
Okay.
dance, right? That's the actual magic.
Mm-hmm.
Magic, I think, is when we can. It's not about shoving down those emotions, but it's about, bringing balance to them. It's about bringing the wholeness to it. It's like allowing it to be there and this other thing to happen.
Mm.
And magic kind of happens when we
So you're
allow
not
both.
replacing, you're
No,
allowing both.
yeah,
Yeah.
you're allowing
Okay.
both. Mhm. Yeah. So I thought that was just some fascinating, it's a fascinating conversation to think about manifesting. It was your idea to talk about it in March. And I think it was a great idea because I think it's kind of misunderstood. I think it deserves a conversation because it kind of feels like it's an elite kind of a thing, you know?
Yes. Like it's
Yeah.
those super thinkers. Like when I was looking up teachers, like
Mhm.
Wayne Dyer, is that how you say his
Mhm,
name?
mhm, mhm.
He's like up there, Abram
Yep.
Hicks,
Yep.
like, oh, they're the super special ones, but
Hmm.
they had to start somewhere.
Yeah. They have to bring it that, yeah, we've got to bring it down to the everyday person. And they don't talk about they don't talk about in those talks because that's what their purpose is about the healing. There was a
Uh,
lot of healing that had to happen in order for them to be to the place where they could allow themselves to begin to manifest. You know,
right.
so so
We see the end. We didn't see the process.
the
Yeah.
journey.
Hmm.
And I think it's, one question I'd have people ask themselves is like, what does it feel like? Think about like what goes through your mind if you think about the fact that you would have to, work for it, or whether you would have to, practice it, how does that feel? Does that feel uncomfortable? Does that feel empowering? Does that feel like, yeah,
Hmm.
that's a great idea, you know? Um,
And so what if it does feel like work? Does that mean you need to scale it back, or does that mean you need to like,
I
I don't,
Yeah, I think both. I think you might have to, it depends. You have to say, okay, do I need to scale this back? Is this
hmm
something I need to scale back? Or is this asking me to, is this there because there's some healing that needs to get done? Like it's like,
yeah,
no. And it takes some time to know the difference in our bodies about whether it's asking us to do more or it's asking us to do less. Because that's the truth. It's like, is it saying, are we wanting it to, are we needing to go in and do this healing work? Or is it like, we need to kind of really be grateful for what we have? We're kind of moving beyond a little bit.
Mm. So like for me, my husband thinks that budgeting is very empowering.
Okay.
And I feel like budgeting is so limiting and it makes me feel like I will have nothing, is kind
Hmm.
of my feeling. And so I I don't know that there's one right or
Right.
wrong. I guess that makes me nervous to say that, but I do think that for me there's some healing that needs to go on of like, why does that
Yeah.
feel, because I'm not losing anything, but
Yeah.
it feels like I am.
Well, I mean, and there's a spectrum within budgeting. I mean, we went through the period of time where we budgeted. So to some people, budgeting means having a place for every piece of dollar, every dollar. It
Hmm.
goes, it has to, it's accounted for. Every dollar is accounted for, and that's what
Right.
some people think is budgeting. Other people think budgeting is, okay, here's how much money I make, and I can't spend more than that.
Okay.
It's a big difference between those two,
True.
right?
True.
And so which one feels like, are both of those equally repulsive to you?
No.
No.
No,
Yeah.
I think I'm somewhere in the middle.
Somewhere in the middle. Yeah. And that's the thing. So really what we thought was this huge in our mind, what feels like I don't like to budget and he likes to budget actually kind of shrinks a little bit, and it's like, okay, what is my definition of budgeting and what's his definition of budgeting? And then we compromise. We come toward the middle for both. You know what I mean?
Wow. Yeah.
So for you, if you're like, look, I want a chunk of money that I don't have to account for, to him, if he can budget that in, you know what I mean? Like, and see how
Yeah.
that feels. I don't know how he wants to do it, but if he's the type that wants
Right.
to every dollar to be accounted for, okay, that's accounted for. It's Shalene's money.
Oh, will you tell me about experience when you've manifested something?
Yeah.
Okay.
So one of the things, I could bring any child into this room right now, any of my 4 kids, and I could say, tell me, they would say, yeah, that was kind of crazy. So we'd be driving along the road and I imagined this like navy blue, like it was a SUV, but it wasn't a big SUV, and it had silver trim, it had trim, And I would be like, we'd be driving along and I'm like, hey, there's my car. I'm like, and I didn't even know what kind it was, what like brand it was, but I just, and it would funny, like sometimes they'd say like, hey mom, that's your car. I'm like, no, that's not it. Like it's different. Like it was not as, it was a little more round there, like it was the slightest detail, but I just had it in my head. And I, at that time, especially, I was just doing my stay-at-home mom thing. I wasn't making any money or whatever, but I wanted this, but there was this, I wanted a different kind of car, and it went on for a couple of years. It was like, someday I want this car. And it was just kind of this funny thing that I did. And then one day it was like, hey, let's go look at, let's go get a new car. It's time to, I don't know why we decided. And we went and we went to this place, and I'm like, that's my car. Like it was it. And when I brought it home, my kids were like, Mom, that's exactly the car you talked about all the time. And even at the same time, within weeks, I started working, and I just started making where I would make the payment. Like I was just beginning, I was like, I even made the payment too.
Wow.
So it was like, it was just funny because the kids are like, Mom, because I would always just tease someday, oh, there's that blue car. It's navy, it's got this silver trim.
Uh-huh.
And all of them were just as surprised as I was. I'm like, I know, like that's my car. And so that
So
was kind of exciting.
when you saw it, can you remember back? Like, did you have feelings? Did you try to imagine yourself driving it? Like, can you remember
Yeah.
any of
Well,
that?
what's funny is like, I wasn't dreaming or wishing for it. It was just like a fact almost. It was just the timing. I wasn't like right. I had no sense of timing in my mind, but I was just like, when I get a car, I know this is what my car is going to be. Like, here's this car. And, and the funny thing is like this particular car, um, it was there was only like you could see them. They didn't always have that silver trim. Like that was a different kind of a package or something. I don't
Mhm.
know. So that's why I could never think of um what the make was, because when I would see one, I'd be like, no, maybe it's not that. Because it had this specific trim.
Wow.
So it wasn't everywhere, but I was just like, that's the one I want. Like that's the one I want. And it took, like I say, it took some time, but it was just, yeah, that's going to happen. Like it just felt true for me. But I had no time frame in my mind about it. It wasn't at the time I didn't even know I was manifesting it. I was just like matter
Yeah.
of factly, hey, when I get a new car, that's what it's going to look like. And I didn't even
Wow.
recognize I mean, to me, I was like, well, to me, it was like, well, that's my preference. I'm going to choose. It was almost more when my kids were like, Mom, like, that's exactly what you described. And I must have described it so much because they knew, it
Oh my
was just something I
gosh.
talked
Wow.
about all the time. Like, that's the car I want. It's going to look like this. It's going to have this, and I want this. And
Yeah.
sure enough, there it is. So kind
That's
of
awesome.
kind of interesting story, but that's one of my manifesting things. I love vision boards. I create a vision board, I stick it in my little bathroom, and sure enough, I still keep, well, maybe I took a picture of it when we moved and just kind of kept it, but sure enough, like everything again checked off the list. um
Wow.
so yeah. So visually, if you're a visual person, that vision board's going to be great. If you're an auditory person, maybe record yourself and listen to it every day.
Hmm.
If you're a feelings person, go through and do kind of a body scan of what that would feel like. Use those use to your advantage, the way that you seek and the way that you find purpose and meaning in the world, the way that you take in
Mm-hmm.
information. So
I
yeah.
like that.
What does manifesting have to do with wholeness? Why would it be something that we would talk about and under the concept of wholeness? Let's
Riff
riff
on
on
that.
that.
Okay. You're much better at thinking on your feet than I am.
Kind of
But
sometimes.
I know. Well, I think in order to really manifest, you have to use all of those four pieces in order to
Mm,
do it.
hmm
Um, but also backing up why would a whole person manifest?
hmm
Maybe is because they see the benefit of it feeding all of those. Do we have to feed the four bodies? I
hmm
think we do to
Yeah.
keep them alive. We have to feed anything, right, to keep it
Yep.
alive.
Yep.
And it kind of feeds all 4 of those areas. It feeds your emotional, right? Because that feels so good. It
Yes.
feels the mental because you're like, I'm actively thinking, I'm actively, making pathways in my brain for things to happen. Spiritually, you're you are connecting, like I said, I'll talk about it in the next podcast, but we're connecting with source because we are part of the source. And that's kind of
Yes.
how it's happening. Like you were
Yep.
talking at the beginning of like, we're having a physical experience, but we're not physical beings.
Right.
So we're operating in these parameters.
Yes.
So I think that, and then what other mental body, physical?
Physical. Yeah. Which you kind of,
Physical.
yeah.
I think you're feeling all of those. Well, I guess that's feeling, but
It's a physical feeling is physical. Like it's not
right.
just like we think about being happy, but if we feel happy, we're having a physical experience,
Yeah, true.
And we're
They all
also
bleed.
right. They do. So yeah, I think I love that idea of the whole part of us. And I think would it be possible? Like think about that impossible. Is it impossible, or is it possible that I can be whole enough that all my wants and desires and my dreams can actually come true? Like, can I believe in this wholeness within myself that I can bring that to fruition? That's the ultimate idea of wholeness is the ability to live a life that is balanced, that is connecting, that is filled with all the emotions, and that includes the things that we desire and manifest. Our desires and our wishes are as much part of us, as much as our wholeness as anything else, and we sometimes belittle those a little bit. We think we've got to do all this other stuff first, and then we can wish and hope and dream.
Yes. But it has to be almost like part of our routine.
Yes. Yep.
And that's what I was going to ask you. Like, do you set aside time to manifest? Is it something that kind of goes in waves?
It comes in waves. I have at 11:11 every single day, I get this notification that says, visit your vision, and I've taken a picture of my vision
Oh,
board and it pops up, and some days I look at it for a minute and remember and think and feel what those things are, what do I think about when I look at those things? What are the focus of those things? Do they still matter for me? Other days I say, oh, look, it's 11:01 and that's going to pop up. Just check that off. Like, oh,
okay.
I'm at the dentist. I'm not going to do that today. Like it's a flow. I mean, that's the thing is
Hmm.
I allow it to happen in a flow and not in a rigid like hierarchy of what I'm supposed to do. You know what I mean? I
That's
just
also the clenching. So you do have to
right.
be really open. Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the trust. I think that's the opposite of what we've kind of been taught. It's like the opposite. We're like, oh, we got to do this. We got to be this. We got to try this. This is what it looks like to be a good person, and it's very rigid. And the truth is it's a flow. The truth is we're at
That
our
is,
best, different times. And our best, we're always doing our best, actually. We're always doing our best. It's just different from one day to the next. So
right. Okay.
yeah, good.
Awesome. Okay. See you
Good,
next
good.
time.
Okay. That's right. Feel empowered every day with wholeness videos, meditations, downloads, classes, and more by joining the Wholeness Library at thewholenessnetwork.com.